Alexandra and Kyle from the organization, who are going to talk us through a little bit about what they do and how we can be advocates as well. So I will pass it over to you, Kyle and Alexandra. Thank you so much for joining the Junior League tonight, and hopefully someday we can invite you to our headquarters on Newbury Street and be in person together.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And I want to give a huge shout out to Victoria. Thank you for setting this up and introducing us to the Junior League of Boston. So I'm just going to share my screen and then we'll just dive right in. We just have a presentation and we can answer questions as we go through. So feel free, if you have any questions, to just ask. All right, can everyone see that?
Not yet.
Oh.
There we go. Yep.
Okay. Oh, here we go. Okay. So now is it like presentation mode?
All set.
Great. All right. So we'll just give you a quick overview of MABVI and more specifically kind of dive into volunteering. Again, my name is Alexandra. I'm the manager of volunteer services, and my supervisor, Kyle Robidoux, is here. He's the director of volunteer services and community engagement. So just a quick overview, and we'll just go through these slides quickly. They're basically covering a lot what we give our volunteers. But at any point, if you guys have questions, please just jump in, and we'll pause at the end of each section so you guys can ask questions if you have stuff on a particular topic. All right, so we want to give you an overview of who we are. So MABVI is actually one branch of MAB Community Services. So that's like our giant parent kind of nonprofit organization. So we've been creating opportunities for people with disabilities since 1903. And Helen Keller was actually on the first advisory board. And she helped to create, along with some other notable Bostonians, some of the first services for blind individuals. So this is our mission statement. Again, MAB Community Services, overarching mission statement. So the main thing we want to focus on is we're eliminating barriers and creating opportunities. And we kind of concentrate on folks with visual impairments and head trauma and other disabilities. So as I mentioned, this is a big organization, but we have three kind of branches that almost act as individual nonprofits themselves. So Kyle and I work for the Massachusetts Association for the Blind and Visually Impaired, and I'll just refer to it as MABVI because it is a mouthful. So we'll just call it MABVI from here on out. But the other two sections are MAB Adult Disability Services, or ADS, and Ivy Street School. So just to let you know what these branches do, Ivy Street School, it's a residential and day school serving adolescents and young adults ages 13 to 22 with brain injuries, autism spectrum disorder, or behavioral health challenges. Ivy Street really helps students learn the skills they need to transition to successful adult life in the community. And MABVI is actually, our offices are located within Ivy Street School. It's a beautiful building in Brookline. I don't know if anyone's ever been there or seen it. If you come to an in-person training, hopefully we'll have those in the future, you'll be able to go into this building. It's a really beautiful building, but that's where our offices are actually located. And then we've got another branch, which is MAB Adult Disability Services, or ADS, and they provide residential supports and vocational day habilitation programming for individuals with developmental disabilities or brain injuries in Greater Boston. And ADS actually operates 20 residential homes and serves about 300 people each year. And lastly, you've got our branch, which is MABVI, and we provide vision rehabilitation and support services to more than 1,400 people over the age of 18. So we also, some of the programs we offer are our peer support groups, one-to-one volunteer assistance, which is what Kyle and I help to run, and which Victoria is a part of. And then we also have in-home visitor rehab, occupational training, access tech, and adjustment counseling. So we kind of serve with all of those programs through MABVI. All right, any questions on that first section? Anyone want to ask anything about the organization? All right, well, Kyle, you want to take us away with what it does it mean to be blind or visually impaired?
Certainly. So I want to just echo Allie's welcome and thank you to the Junior League. We really appreciate this opportunity. Also to Victoria. And Victoria, you are the volunteer expert in all of and the three of us. So if you feel comfortable towards the end, we'd love to invite you to share some of your thoughts and experiences being a volunteer with us. And trust us when we say this is usually a very interactive training with a lot of gadgets and anecdotal stories and some fun surveys. But because it's via Zoom, it's a little limited, but we will make the best that we can. And as Allie said, my name is Kyle. I also work with her in the volunteer program, and I live in the kind of South End, Lower Roxbury neighborhood of Boston. So when we talk about kind of blindness and vision loss, it's always, we like to start with kind of some misconceptions and some myths. So what does it actually mean to be blind or visually impaired? So for folks like, there's a wide spectrum and a range of folks who are blind or visually impaired. Actually, a small percentage of individuals are what we call totally blind. So a lot of individuals, including myself, who is legally blind, has some kind of spectrum of what we call usable vision. And as a volunteer with MABVI, we always tell folks that it's important to understand kind of the range of vision that individuals have and how it impacts their daily life, but not necessarily be an expert on what type of eye disease they have or exactly what they see on a day-to-day basis. And then we often talk about a difference between kind of visual impairment or low vision and blindness. Sometimes these often blur, no pun intended, but blindness is kind of the state of being unable to see at all, due to injury, disease, or genetic condition, whereas low vision or visually impaired or visual impairment is kind of a decrease in the ability to see to a certain degree, in which they may be defined as legally blind or just have really low vision, but have the ability on the spectrum maybe to see some light perception, may have peripheral vision or tunnel vision, or blind spots throughout their eyes. So legal, like I said, legal blindness, totally blind, are two ways in which we often kind of define, and then low vision, the spectrum and the different levels of vision impairment. So, low vision, someone who may have partial vision either in one eye or both eyes, although they may or may not be classified as legally blind, they still have low vision, what we call kind of functional, usable vision, and they've retained some vision over a period of time. Legal blindness, so again, don't get necessarily caught up in the definitions, but legal blindness is a definition. It's usually the ability to see, and I think it's 2200 now in the state of Massachusetts. So if your acuity is less than 2200 or greater than 2200, you are defined as legally blind. Or if your peripheral vision, so what you see out to the side, is less than 20 degrees. So for someone like myself, my legal blindness is defined by my peripheral vision is down to 3 to 4% of a field. However, I do have corrected vision at about a 20 to 50 ratio, and also why I wear glasses to help with that correctable vision as well.
Great. Anyone have any questions on kind of those definitions or what it means to be legally blind? All right, we'll jump into some common eye diseases. And again, as Kyle mentioned, don't worry about these. We're just trying to give you kind of a smattering of what some people who our volunteers interact with and the population that we serve, what they might be experiencing. So macular degeneration is a big one. So it's a really big factor in people age over 65 and older. Age-related macular degeneration, or AMD. So that's the leading cause of vision loss for people 65 and older. So a lot of people that we serve and our volunteers are matched with they have AMD. And if you look at the picture there, that's kind of giving you an example of what someone who has AMD might be seeing when they're looking at, it's actually two kids holding soccer balls, kind of leaning in together, and like that center piece is kind of gone there. All right, so retinitis pigmentosa, or RP. So this is an eye disease that rarely causes total loss of vision, but individuals usually experience tunnel vision. So it's almost like if you were to hold up like a paper towel tube to your eye and look through it, that's kind of the image that you're seeing there. It's a rare genetic disorder, and it's actually caused by loss of cells in the retina, which is that light sensitive tissue that lines the back of the eye. And glaucoma is another big one. Again, it is a genetic disorder, but unlike RP, it actually usually causes total blindness, but you also get that tunnel vision there. So similar to RP, but you can have total blindness. And cataracts, which I know like my parents have right now. Cataracts is a common cause of vision loss of people over age 40, and that causes that blurry clouding or opaqueness in the lens of the eye. And so it makes it really hard to drive at night or to see people's facial expressions because it's kind of losing that acuity. All right. Any questions on any of those? All right, I want to go for orientation and mobility.
Yes, so a big part of what MABVI volunteers do and what individuals who support folks who are blind or visually impaired do is what we call kind of orientation mobility or sighted guide. So there's different opportunities and ways in which those of us who are blind or visually impaired move through space. And it's actually a program that we provide, O&M, which I think we'll talk a little bit about. But there are primarily two tools that individuals use to help orient and move through space. So the one is a white cane. So sometimes this is a collapsible or foldable cane, but it's usually red and white to identify someone with vision loss. And it's used to identify things that may be in front of me or on the surface or around me. So things that I primarily use my white cane for are curb cuts, steps down, when stairs are coming, people. They also come in very handy if there are cars double parked in crosswalks. I'm able to whack my white cane on the car and hopefully get it to move, or dent it if they're not moving. And it's a tool to kind of use through different styles and lengths that white canes come in. Some may be short, a little bit longer, and they often have a rolling tip on the end of it. So you kind of tap it back and forth, and it's a training, like we go through training to learn how to use our white cane. But it really helps kind of identify things that are waist down that may be in our way, including people and sidewalks and fire hydrants and desks and so forth. The other are guide dogs. So I'm sure we've all seen them out there, folks using a guide dog with a harness, and it may have seeing eye dog, guide dog on it, or guide dog. So it's actually a really small percentage of people who are blind or visually impaired who use a guide dog. This is often because there's not enough guide dogs out there. There's a number of schools all throughout the country, including 2 in New York that are commonly used and 1 in New Jersey for folks on the East Coast. And the important kind of etiquette when a guide dog is in harness, and we talk a lot at the Ivy Street School where we're housed about, and then just out in the community as well, that if a guide dog is wearing their harness, that means they're working, and their primary job is to move the person and keep the person safe who they're working with. So we always encourage folks, do not engage, feed, or pet or talk to a guide dog when it is in harness because it's working. If the guide dog is not in their harness, maybe they're in the park or on a bio break, you can certainly ask someone, oh, may I pet your dog, or may I engage it? But we encourage folks not to when it's in harness, because their job is to guide them, and we don't want them to be distracted. So mention, how does one get a guide dog? It's actually a pretty in-depth process. You usually apply to a school. It could take a year or two to be on a waiting list. And then you go to the guide dog school, you get assigned a dog, and you usually spend about 4 to 6 weeks at the school. So it's a pretty intensive process where the dog is introduced to you after their normal training. They usually go through like 12 to 24 months of training on their own, and then they're matched with someone, and then those individuals begin to form a partnership and work together. And they are often start in a confined space, like on the campus of the guide dog school, and they do everything from walking sidewalks to walking streets. And then you learn how to identify different items like buttons on elevators or door handles. And then when they come back into their home, then there's some additional support provided to help them orient on common routes or areas that they may use. And then they start to be trained on who so-and-so may be. So we have a guide dog, our coworker had a guide dog in the office, and we're a couple doors down, and she could say, go find Kyle. And the dog would kind of walk a couple steps down to my office. Or if they're in a really big crowd, you could say, find Ryan, who may be their son, and it can help you navigate. So the dogs are trained both in their environment where they're permanently, but also in the school setting as well. So we're going to pause for a minute and invite folks either to unmute yourself and share with us or drop into the chat. We'd love to hear, so what would you choose? Would you choose to have a white cane or a guide dog? And if you feel comfortable, if time allows, you can kind of share like one sentence on why you would choose one or the other.
I think my name's Amanda. I have my video disabled. I'm feeding my son dinner, but I think I'd pick a guide dog. I'm an animal lover, and so I think that bond would be really special. And also what I was gonna drop into the chat was, has anybody seen the movie or documentary? It's called Pick of the Litter. No, but if you haven't, it's about how, I don't know if they're training centers or what have you, train puppies to become guide dogs, and it takes you through the process, and it's really heartwarming and highly recommend it.
Oh, that's great. I think our coworker Chaz may be in that little documentary with his guide dog Trisha, but I'm not 100% sure.
That's awesome.
Anyone else want to share for a minute?
I'm pretty torn because I feel like there'd be some anxiety with the dog and not having control over it yourself. But I agree that, having like, somebody having a dog that can smell and pick people out. I mean, I didn't know that they could pick somebody out or find someone for you, which I think that's pretty powerful.
Yeah, definitely. Maybe one more person wants to share.
I envision that being blind would be fairly lonely. I would enjoy the dog that I could interact with and have right with me, so I could reach out to them at any point. So that would be good company as well as as help.
Nice. We got a bunch of dog lovers, so that's excellent. So it's generally speaking, it's not 100%, but generally speaking, folks like myself who have some usable vision are, still prefer, or not prefer, but traditionally use a white cane. You actually have to qualify with a decreased amount of vision in order to get a guide dog. And there's been some instances where people have applied to get a guide dog and the school will come back and say, you actually have enough usable vision, hold off and wait, because part of being matched with a guide dog is you have to just totally entrust and give everything over to the guide dog. So folks with usable vision like myself, I can still use my vision to get around, but that's detrimental to having a guide dog, or it's not a perfect match because the guide dog really needs to fully guide. And then for me, I've never had to feed my white cane, or I don't have to take my white cane for a walk at 11 o'clock at night if it has to take a bio break. And I can just fold my white cane up in my bag and take it to go. So it's a little bit more maneuverable for me. The good news with guide dogs is that the schools that they come from, most of them have agreements where they pay for X amount of years of food and then like one veterinarian bill a year, as long as the guide dog stays within like a weight range. So they want to ensure that the guide dog is healthy, so they continue to provide that food, and then 1 or 2 veterinary appointments a year, which is really great. And then for folks to be eligible to get a guide dog, they actually have to demonstrate that they can walk at least a mile, partly because they want to ensure that the guide dog is going to remain engaged and active, which is actually one of the things that we're experiencing with COVID right now, is that because people are experiencing more social isolation, guide dogs are not being engaged as frequently as they were. So then when someone decides to kind of go out, a lot of folks are having a hard time keeping their guide dog focused right now during COVID, which is really challenging. And then just the cycle of being able to train guide dogs while being at the social distance and so forth has been really challenging. So the good news is that there's no good or like kind of better tool to use. A lot of it is personal preference, and we really appreciate everyone sharing that as well.
All right.
Can I ask another quick question?
Definitely.
So my question is around travel. And obviously a dog would be much more challenging because like of travel, I think they're considered a medical or a necessary, like, I'm not sure what the word is on the planes. They're not like an emotional support animal, they're like a medical support animal. So like obviously they're allowed on planes, but I don't even know if for international if that's allowed. But like, is the the stick, right? Am I saying it right?
The white cane. Yep.
The white cane considered, is that internationally recognized for blind people, or is that like only mostly common in Western nations or in the US? Like, is it something that is like, if you wanted to travel to Europe, like would Europe or even like Asia, like would they recognize that? Is that like the white cane, like international symbol? Because obviously I feel like traveling with an animal internationally would be really challenging. So just wondering on that piece.
Yeah, a couple things to unpack there. That's a fabulous question. So easiest one first. So the white cane is kind of internationally recognized. I've been in other countries traveling where folks have recognized my white cane, and people give me assistance or ask if I need support based on that. I would say that my experience is that it's culturally a big difference, in which some cultures, folks do not use white canes because they see it as a sign of weakness and also an issue of safety. And we see that everywhere, even in the US, where if you have a white cane, some people feel that they're an easy target. So they may not want to use a white cane because of that, or they may not want to be identified as someone with vision loss, just emotionally. And then also in some countries and cultures as well, just individuals with disabilities and disability in general is often not overly accepted. So I do find that there's white canes used less frequently in different cultures in some countries. The guide dog piece. So legally, guide dogs are allowed anywhere that an individual is who's experiencing a person with a disability. And not to get overtly political in policy, but the rise in emotional support dogs has created a very challenging dynamic with guide dogs. So guide dogs, there's actually no paperwork that you receive to have a guide dog. And legally, you cannot be asked to show paperwork to have a guide dog. So that what has been confusing is that with emotional support dogs, there is like an online form, like my parents did it, right? You can fill out an online form to have an emotional support dog. So that's created this dynamic where people are like, oh, there's a form, you have to show me a form. So there's a really fine line between a sighted guide dog or a service animal and an emotional support dog, without getting into which one is better or more needed. So that's created a lot of confusion in the past 4 to 5 months. But guide dogs are allowed on planes, trains, automobiles. In international travel or just in the US, guide dogs are also trained in terms of bio breaks to be able to hold their bathroom needs for long extended period of times, including 4 to 6 hour flights. Any other questions? These are great questions around kind of guide dogs, white canes. All right, so sighted guide is another way that folks get around in terms of orientation mobility. Sighted guide, or sometimes what we call human guide, is the technique in which an individual who is blind or visually impaired asks for the support of someone, and they're led usually by holding their arm just above the elbow, and the individual with sight is the guide, and that's how they move through space. So there are times when I may, have my cane out, but I'll also grab on to my friend's and my wife's arm to have some additional support, or I may not have my white cane with me, and I'll just kind of hold on to them through that space as well. So when we talk about how you interact with individuals, so for sighted guide, what we ask folks to do, and we usually do this training in person, but you introduce yourself. Hey, my name is Jane. Would you like some support? It's always important to know when you're engaging with anyone in life, particularly an individual with disability, be prepared for them sometimes to say, no, I'm fine, thank you so much. And then to respect their request or them saying that they're good. So never assume that someone actually needs your help. And then the guiding technique is usually a half a step ahead. And while you're guiding, walking together at a normal pace, we tell folks, you don't have to slow down, you don't have to speed up, just walk at a normal pace. And if needed, we can correct you to kind of slow down or tell you to speed up. And the half a step ahead is great, because then I can feel, or whoever you're guiding is able to feel when you are going up or down, or if you're going left or right. It gives us a little bit of more of a tactile feel of what's happening. And then we also talked about just use descriptive language. The most challenging part of guiding is to replace here with a description. So instead of saying there are stairs here, or there's a table here, I have no idea where here is. So you can say there's a table 2 feet to your right, or we're coming up on a set of stairs. So even when using my cane, it's also helpful just to kind of complement those verbal guides while I'm using my cane as well, if needed.
All right, any questions on that? And as Kyle mentioned, we usually do that in person, and in the training, we have a nice 10-minute video that kind of details it out a little more. Any questions on sighted guide or mobility in general? All right, I'll get into volunteering with MABVI. So as I mentioned, Kyle and I run the volunteer department along with other members of our team. We have an office in Boston, or in Brookline actually, and an office in Worcester. And we have volunteers all over the state. So we have about 300 volunteers that are matched one-to-one with someone who is blind or visually impaired. And the whole goal of our program is to create equity, foster independence, and help someone do something that they otherwise wouldn't be able to relearn once they're experiencing vision loss. So volunteers really help with recreation. So walking or running as a sighted guide. We even have volunteers who have help with swimming or golfing, or setting up an in-home gym or going to the gym. So that's a huge one. Reading mail or emails is super helpful. That's probably the biggest thing that a lot of our volunteers do, is help with reading mail. Also shopping assistance, so going to the grocery store, going clothes shopping, CVS or essential items, that type of thing. And during COVID, we've transitioned where a lot of volunteers just do it contactless. So they'll go to the store for someone with a list, pick that up, and then drop it off at their home, instead of actually bringing the consumer with them. And then clerical tasks like paying bills, writing checks, not so much anymore because of a lot of it is all digitized, but that type of thing. You might need to create a system for your clothes, or you want to create a filing system for your paperwork or things like that. So that's a really big one. And then the last one is medical transportation. And this program is primarily in Worcester. And we have volunteers who will escort someone to their medical program and then assist them to get in the building, to their appointment, see their doctor, and then bring them home. So that is a really that's a really needed volunteer role. All right, so all of our volunteers want to be able to support someone so they feel confident living with vision loss. We want all of our participants to live the full and complete lives that they want to live. So volunteers help with that. What we don't want our volunteers doing are things like cooking, cleaning, or laundry. So all of those things that can be relearned. Different ways. We have our occupational therapists who come into the home, and they will work with someone so that they are able to relearn these things and do them themselves. So our volunteers really want to help with the things that, you know, otherwise can't be relearned, like reading mail, for instance. So who can volunteer? Anyone can volunteer. If you're 18 or older, you can be matched 1-to-1 with someone. And anyone 17 or younger must be accompanied by a parent or guardian with them at all times during the volunteer match. Currently, we have over 150 people waiting to be matched throughout the state. And this is something that, like, we've been trying to work to get the list down, but it's great because the word of mouth is spreading. So as word of mouth spreads, more people want the volunteer services. So it's kind of like, you know, a vicious cycle, for lack of a better term. But it's great. We have a lot of people waiting, but we also are getting more and more volunteers. So it's wonderful that we have so many people interested in helping out. But volunteers also often develop into lifelong friendships with their participant. We do ask for about a 6-month commitment, but we've had volunteer matches last upwards of 30 years. So it really usually does become a beautiful friendship, and it's neighbors helping neighbors. All right. I want to talk about Team with a Vision.
Sure. So one other volunteer opportunity, we, as Ali mentioned, most of our work focuses on 1-to-1 volunteering. We don't do a lot of group projects, but we do run Team with a Vision as well as United in Stride. United in Stride is a national website that matches runners with sighted guides that we run. But then here locally, MABVI has Team with a Vision, which for 26 years has been our Boston Marathon team. So we not only have, depending on the year, usually 15 to 17 charity bids through the Boston Athletic Association and the John Hancock program as a charity organization. So folks who want to raise money and run the Boston Marathon, they're able to do that through our charity bids. And then the Team with a Vision also has about 30 individuals who are blind or visually impaired, myself included, who have run the marathon. And we run it with Team with a Vision. We're Boston qualified runners, but we are blind or visually impaired. So we lean on Team with a Vision to help connect us with sighted guides to run the marathon. About 25 of the members come from out of state to run the Boston Marathon because it is such a prestigious race. So Team with a Vision helps with everything from homestays over marathon weekend. We do volunteer tours to keep people engaged. We have a number of group events and dinners all throughout the weekend. So those are Boston Marathon weekend is a great opportunity for groups that want to volunteer and support our work, whether it's hosting as a homestay or volunteering to cook meals or be sighted guides throughout the city. Or we have a cheer section, usually at mile 24, right near our office. So Team with a Vision is it's our largest fundraiser for our organization. It brings in about $250,000 to $300,000 a year. And also with it being canceled this year, we're doing a fun coast to coast challenge. So it's a virtual race starting in San Francisco, ending in Boston. It's free to sign up, and we are doing it as an individual or teams of 4 that want to try to make it as far as they can across the country, walking or running. So if you want more information, check out our website. And then if you're a runner and you want to be a sighted guide, you're here locally, you have the opportunity to guide folks. I'm always looking for sighted guides. There's a handful of other folks who are blind and visually impaired looking for sighted guides, but also for Junior League or your workplace, your company. If you're looking for group volunteer projects, Boston Marathon is a great opportunity for that as well.
Great. So just real quick, the steps to volunteer. So if you are interested in volunteering in any capacity, just reach out to me and we'll start you off with a volunteer application. And then you complete a one-to-one volunteer training. You actually took a lot of it just now. And then we do want to do a background check of all of our volunteers because you're going into people's homes or interacting with our participants. So we run a query. And then we have a short interview with you, and we really dive into your preferences. So each match is unique, and we really try to make it so that you're comfortable, especially right now with COVID going on. We ask a lot of questions, and we just give you a space that you can voice, you know, whatever it is you're looking for and what you're comfortable with. And then we try and match you with someone who meets that. So we do everything from like travel preferences to, you know, are you comfortable going inside the home and social distancing or things like that. So yeah, and then we match you with someone, and the whole process takes, you know, anywhere like a week to 2 weeks once you start the application. But yeah, it can all be done virtually now, quick and easy. But I will let, you know, if anyone has any questions on volunteering, you can always reach out to me. There's my email there, or Victoria has it, or Caitlin has it. And please reach out to me if you are interested in volunteering or have any questions about the organization. But we'll take any questions now about, you know, anything MABVI related.
And just one thing to add around our volunteer program is just to underscore that we are statewide. So the volunteer program is across Massachusetts, everywhere except for the Cape and Islands. Obviously, of the 150 people who are on the waiting list, a large amount of those are from the greater Boston area. But we're in Metro West, we're out in the Berkshires, we have an office in Worcester that has a pretty robust volunteer program. So pretty much anywhere where someone lives or works, we're able to find a match for them to volunteer with us.
Awesome. Great. I think we have a couple questions in the chat. Sarah has, what does a typical weekly schedule look like for volunteering? Example, how many days, amount of time, etc.
Yeah, sure. So we ask our volunteers to budget about 1 to 2 hours a week for this volunteer commitment. And again, we ask for at least 6 months because it does take a while for you and your participant match to get comfortable and kind of fall into a rhythm. But usually, I mean, it's really nuanced depending on the volunteer opportunity. So if it's mail reading and someone actually only needs mail like every other week, then it might just be every other week. Or they might just only need groceries like every 3 weeks, or, you know, so it's kind of just what the task is and what you have for availability, but it'll never be more than 1 to 2 hours a week. That's kind of the max.
Awesome. That's great. And then I think another question from a little bit back, someone was curious if the organizations provide support for the dog's whole life in the case of the seeing eye dog.
That is a very good question and not one that I know. We don't intimately work with guide dog schools. Obviously, we have some staff who have guide dogs, and you know, there's now actually running guide dogs, which is awesome. But I'm not sure. I do know when dogs, quote unquote, retire, which is usually, depending on the dog, between 5 to 10 years, the current owner is given the option to keep that dog and then get an extra dog if they want. But all the perks of food and veterinarian support, I honestly don't know if that continues. I do know the dollar amount, folks say it's usually about $40,000 to $50,000 to raise a guide dog, or breed and then train a guide dog. But the person who's getting the guide dog doesn't pay.
Any other questions from the group? Feel free to just hop off mute.
Hi, I've just got a quick question about the United in Stride. So you'd mentioned that the runners are Boston qualified runners. So we often have people who want to run but are not Boston qualified runners. So what pace do you need somebody who'd be guiding a runner to be meeting?
Yeah, good question. So, I mean, just to reiterate, so there's also the option if they want to just run on their own, they can go the charity bib route if they're available. And then for guides, you know, we have runners who are blind and visually impaired who are running. Actually, our coworker right now is probably the fastest marathoner in the country. He runs about a 2:31 marathon. And then we have some marathoners who run 5 to 6 hours. So, and then everyone in between. And depending on individuals' abilities, their paces, most generally speaking, anyone who's running a 4-hour marathon or less will split, have 2 guides, one for the first half, one for the second. And then depending on availability of guides and things of that nature. Obviously Chaz gets a bunch of guides because he's so blazing fast, but so they're all abilities. And then even the guide on an ongoing basis, there's abilities, walking, running, 12-minute miles, 15-minute miles, anything up from, 5 or 6-minute miles as well. And we do tell folks that, because the marathon has become so competitive and such an interest for people to guide, that we get calls all the time. We've had great folks like Scott Jurek and Peter Sagal from Wait, Wait, Don't Tell Me. They've all been kind of celebrity guides for us, which then generates a bunch of interest. And then so we get flooded with calls right before marathon weekend saying, hey, I want to guide. We tell folks that the best opportunity to guide in Boston is actually to connect with someone who's training for Boston, be their guide, and then you're likely to get invited and asked to run with them. And I do the same thing. Like when I start training for Boston, if I'm trying to recruit a guide, I'll sometimes use that as a carrot and an incentive to say, hey, if you can commit, every week or every other week for 8 or 10 mile runs, I'll be looking for 2 guides, every Boston Marathon.
Great. We have a couple more questions in the chat. What are the average ages for people in your program?
For volunteers or participants?
I think for participants.
Yeah. So because of the nature of our work, we do primarily work with older adults who are experiencing age-related vision loss. So they've lived their entire life with full sight, and they become 50, 60, 70 years of age, and they start to lose their vision, whether it's age-related macular degeneration or cataracts. So about 70% of the folks who we work with are over the age of 60. We have some folks in our low vision peer support groups who are 90, 100 years old. I would say that our volunteer program, in terms of the participants, probably has the widest range of age, just because there are people all over the spectrum who need different levels of support. But generally speaking, we are known as the organization who works with the older adults who are experiencing vision loss, but we have a ton of folks who are in their 20s and their 30s as well.
Awesome. And then one more question we have, do you have an office on the North Shore?
No, so our offices are just Brookline and Worcester. But if you wanted to volunteer on the North Shore, we have a lot of participants waiting on the North Shore. So it would be the Brookline office that you would work out of. And we would connect you with someone on the North Shore.
Yeah. And the great news with COVID right now is that, and it was in motion right before, and Allie kind of spearheaded that process. Our training is now online through a learning management system. But prior to that, we actually did do every other month, we did a training in the North Shore in the PV library. So we still, if needed, have that opportunity and that relationship with the library if we ever had the need to do another training up there. And then we do have an Access Tech training program that teaches assistive technology, and they are in the process of opening up a training center and a computer lab. It's most likely going to be at the Salem Senior Center, and that will have some volunteer opportunities for folks to do Access Tech training as well. Great questions.
Yeah. Any other questions out there?
I just wanted to say 2 quick things, if I could. First, I'm someone who wants to know, I always want to make sure I am able to do what I commit to doing, especially when there's someone else involved in a situation like this and you're making a commitment of at least 6 months. And it was very clear and very easy to know exactly what that commitment was going to be. And I made it clear to Alexandra, and then she gave me a list of people, this person lives here and they need this once a month. This person lives here and they need this twice a month. So it's the commitment is very obvious, and you are agreeing to do what you can do. So I grocery shop for a woman once a month. And we've talked, Alexander and I have talked about potentially adding someone else, because I like the organization, like the mail reading, like getting people's junk mail out of their kitchen. Like that just, I like sort of filing things. And so I'm waiting to see if there's someone sort of around where I live where I can end up doing that too. But the commitment piece of it is very, very clear. So you're agreeing to what you can do. And then the other thing I wanted to say is that MABVI has mastered the little gatherings, the celebrations over Zoom. I've only been doing this since COVID hit. So I don't know if you guys do that in person too, and things are normal, but this is kind of it's a very one-on-one thing. So you're grocery shopping for someone or talking to one person, and there wouldn't necessarily be an opportunity to meet the other volunteers and to meet other clients. They're really good about, I think, valuing their volunteers and getting people together to kind of just have fun. So it's like another extra little thing that I can look forward to in addition to the actual volunteering. So
Thanks.
That is, yeah, that was very kind of you. Thank you. And thanks for being such a great volunteer.
Mhm. Great.
Looks like we have one other question just came in. In terms of training, there's a preliminary training and then an orientation with the person that you'll be volunteering with. Is that how it works?
So yeah, we do kind of the application and the interview and the online training, and you complete all those before you're matched with someone. And then when you are matched with someone, we kind of stay in the loop and just make sure that you guys have connected, but we lay out kind of the steps. So it's you call them, you chat with them, they know, we set up beforehand that they know that you're about to call them, they're expecting your call. And so then you chat with them and you decide on your first time to grocery shop or your first time to meet in person. And then you guys kind of go from there. So you'll meet, and we stay in the loop to make sure you did meet, you're comfortable with the match, it is what you thought, like all of that. And then it's just kind of like a neighbor helping a neighbor. You continue to keep in touch with that person and you just kind of go on volunteering that way. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, and it's pretty random. I mean, there's some obviously pre-COVID, but there's some like matches who like every Monday they meet at a coffee shop to go through their mail. And then some folks are like, great, we met today. Do you want to meet again in 2 weeks or 3 weeks, or what time next week works for you? So it's also really nice, the flexibility of you're not necessarily boxed into a certain time and a date every single week for the most of the folks who are working with, which, if you're balancing family or school or demanding work or all those things, volunteering with us provides a tremendous amount of flexibility.
Fantastic. That's great. I feel like I've learned so much, not just about your program, but the people that you empower. So I'm so excited to have all this information. So I'll just give it one more chance for anyone to have any lingering questions, but please do feel free to email me. I also put Alexandra's email in the chat, as well as the website. So you can read up more information, reach out, and we're always here. So if any last minute, another link into the website there. So great. Well, I really appreciate both of your time, Kyle and Alexandra. This was such a wonderful learning session, and I'm excited for the Junior League of Boston to follow you guys and encourage our members to reach out. So yes, we're so excited. Thank you so much for your time, and have a wonderful evening.